You need to watch this if you crave chills down your spine. Welcome to Soul Studios. Here, true crime meets the unknown. Suspense lurks in every shadow, and supernatural forces whisper from the dark. We craft chilling, edge-of-your-seat short stories inspired by the eerie, the unexplained, and the most haunting mysteries. 3 new stories drop every week, each one darker than the last. Are you ready to step inside? Subscribe now before the next story finds you.
What if the only way to move forward was to go back? Michael Kim is a man crushed under the relentless weight of deadlines, pressure, and a life that's lost its meaning. One stormy night, overwhelmed and desperate, he makes a silent wish for escape and wakes up 30 years in the past, back in the warm, familiar embrace of his childhood. In a world filled with the scent of pancakes, the sound of baseball in the yard, and the laughter of his best friend, Michael rediscovers the simple joys he'd buried beneath ambition and burnout. But time is fleeting, and the question remains, was this a second chance or just a dream? This is a heartfelt, immersive journey through memory, love, and the power of rediscovering your true self. Perfect for fans of emotional storytelling, magical realism, and nostalgic, soul-stirring narratives. If this story moved you, made you smile, or made you think, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to Soul Studios. We bring you powerful, cinematic stories that blend mystery, heart, and meaning. Hit the bell so you never miss the next journey into the unknown. Chapter 1. The Weight of the Present. Michael sat hunched over his desk, the glow of a computer screen casting sharp shadows across his face. It was well past midnight in the heart of the city, and the office floor was nearly deserted, except for the hum of an overworked HVAC system and the distant ring of a lone telephone that no one answered. The air was stale and tinged with the smell of burnt coffee from the pot that had been simmering since noon, bitter, acrid fumes that added to the tight knot in his stomach. Papers lay scattered around Michael's keyboard, spreadsheets with tiny, inscrutable numbers that seemed to dance whenever he tried to focus on them. He rubbed his eyes, which ached from hours of squinting at the monitor. The tension in his neck had settled in like a permanent resident, a stiff ache that flared whenever he moved too quickly. Outside the tall glass window of the 35th floor, the city lights spangled the darkness. Neon signs blinked in the distance, and headlights streamed along wet asphalt in endless ribbons of red and white. A late-night drizzle was falling, blurring the world beyond into a smear of coloured light. Even here, inside the climate-controlled tower of steel and glass, Michael could imagine the smell of rain on concrete, a metallic, cool scent that once used to calm him, but now only reminded him of how far he was from anything natural or comforting. On his desk, his phone buzzed yet again, a reminder of the dozen unanswered messages awaiting him. Likely his boss, Richard, checking on the status of the presentation due by dawn. Michael's jaw clenched at the thought. Richard's voice echoed in his head, sharp, insistent, always with a note of impatience. "We need those projections first thing, no excuses," he had barked earlier that day in the glass-walled conference room under the cold glare of fluorescent lights. "If you want to stay on this team, you'll deliver." Now the team was gone for the night. Colleagues he barely knew beyond their Slack avatars and hurried lunchtime small talk, and he alone bore the weight of that promise. Deliver, or else. The pressure pressed against his temples in a relentless throb. He took a slow breath and ran a trembling hand through his hair. It had grown too long in the past few months. He hadn't found the time for a haircut. Just another thing he'd neglected under the onslaught of work. Michael glanced at a small framed photo that sat off to the side of his desk, half hidden by a stack of binders. In the picture, a 10-year-old boy with sun-lightened brown hair grinned at the camera, holding up a fishing rod almost as tall as himself. Beside the boy stood a man in a baseball cap, Michael's father, one strong hand resting proudly on his son's shoulder, the other holding the boy's freshly caught fish. Both father and son beamed with identical smiles beneath a golden summer sun. In the background, a lake shimmered and tall pine trees loomed beyond. The sight of that photograph was both balm and knife twist. Michael reached out and picked it up, his fingertips brushing dust from the frame. The memory flooded back in vivid detail, the sticky feel of July heat on his skin, the mingled smells of lake water and sunscreen, the sound of dragonflies buzzing and his father's laugh when Michael nearly toppled off the dock in excitement. He could almost taste the peanut butter and jelly sandwich they shared earlier that day, eaten on the creaking wooden pier with their feet dangling over the water. In his chest, something squeezed. That day had been 30 years ago. He set the photo down gently. How many years since he'd last gone fishing? Michael couldn't even remember. Certainly not since his father had passed, 5 summers back. Work had swallowed everything in the years after the funeral. He'd thrown himself into the job to drown the grief, and it had worked, in a way. The pain of loss had been gradually blotted out by endless emails and back-to-back deadlines. But at times, like now, when he paused for a moment, the old ache resurfaced alongside a profound sense of emptiness. A sharp ping from his computer jolted him out of his reverie. A calendar alert glowed on the screen. 1 a.m., deadline, sales forecast presentation. Michael's chest tightened, a vice clamping slowly around his ribs. He had maybe 6 hours left to finalize everything. He had to focus. He swallowed and reached for the cold mug of coffee on his desk, taking a sip. It was like swallowing ashes and mud. He grimaced, pushing the mug away, and stood up. His legs were stiff, and the room spun for a moment from the sudden change in position. A wave of dizziness and exhaustion washed over him. In the silence of the empty office, Michael became acutely aware of the faint buzz of the overhead lights. It was a hollow, insectile drone, and combined with the thrum of blood in his ears, it set his teeth on edge. He paced to the window and pressed a palm against the cool glass. The city below was alive even at this hour. Horns honking, a siren wailing somewhere far off, the rumble of a garbage truck making its rounds. Red taillights glowed through the misty rain, smearing like watercolours. For a moment he let his eyes unfocus, and all the lights blurred into a soft haze of colour, as if the city were just an abstract painting, beautiful perhaps, but distant. His reflection hovered ghost-like on the window's surface. In it he saw a man nearly 40, with pale skin and tired eyes shadowed by dark circles. His once athletic frame had grown a bit stooped from too many late nights and too much stress. He barely recognized himself. There had been a time, he recalled dimly, when he used to smile easily, when laughter came readily. A time when each day promised a new adventure rather than another slog through a to-do list. Michael closed his eyes. A memory, unbidden, drifted through his mind. The sound of cicadas on a summer night long ago, the gentle creak of a porch swing under his small legs, the voice of his mother humming a lullaby from the kitchen. The adult Michael stood in a sterile high-rise, but for an instant he was a child on a porch in the warm dark, barefoot on cool grass, gazing at an endless sky of stars. His phone buzzed again on the desk, skittering against a pen. The harsh sound shattered the delicate memory. He turned back, heart pounding with sudden resentment. The notification glowed insistently. Without checking, he knew it was either Richard or some automated reminder of his overdue work. The walls felt as though they were closing in, grey, static, suffocating. His breaths came quick and shallow. "Enough," he whispered to the empty room, his voice a hoarse rasp. His eyes burned, not just from fatigue, but from the sting of tears he refused to shed. Enough. He couldn't do this anymore. Another buzz. Something inside Michael snapped. In a blur of motion, he snatched up his phone and jabbed the power button, silencing it at last. The sudden quiet was shocking. The only sounds now were his own ragged breathing and the electric hum of the office. Michael grabbed his suit jacket off the back of his chair with shaky hands. He didn't even bother to shut down his computer. The elevator ride down was a haze of mirrored walls reflecting his drawn face back at him from every angle. He stepped out into the lobby and strode past the security guard, muttering something about fresh air, then pushed through the revolving doors into the night. Outside, the drizzle had deepened into steady rain. It was colder than he expected. The rain pelted his face, cool pinpricks on his feverish skin. It soaked through his thin cotton shirt in seconds, but he hardly felt it as he walked aimlessly down the sidewalk. The city's late-night smell engulfed him. a mix of damp pavement, car exhaust, and the greasy aroma rising from a 24-hour diner on the corner. The neon open sign of the diner buzzed and flickered, casting an eerie red glow onto the puddles at Michael's feet. He wandered without direction. His leather shoes splashed through puddles, water seeping in until his socks were wet. He shivered, but the fresh air was liberating compared to the claustrophobic office. He tilted his head back as he walked, letting the rain mingle with the hot tears he finally allowed to fall. The city lights above him were hazy orbs, and he watched them through the raindrops on his lashes until his eyes blurred. In a small pocket park a few blocks from his office, just a patch of green with a couple of sodden benches and a bedraggled tree, Michael sank down onto one of the benches. It was empty at this desolate hour. The tree's bare branches swayed in the wind, heavy droplets shaken loose to patter on the ground. The orange glow of a street lamp nearby cast long shadows, and the city's sounds were muffled by the rain's steady whisper. Michael's jacket was soaked. Water dripped from his hair, traced cold trails down his neck. Yet the discomfort barely registered. His mind was spinning, replaying every disappointment, every sacrifice, the endless evenings spent hunched over that desk instead of living his life, the missed family gatherings, the friends whose invitations he'd declined until they gave up asking, the emptiness of his apartment filled only with work files and unanswered messages. "What am I doing?" he thought, a despairing refrain. Lightning flickered behind the clouds, a silent flash that illuminated the park for a split second. Michael looked up. As a boy, he hadn't been afraid of storms. He'd loved them. He used to sit by his bedroom window with his face pressed to the glass, watching each flicker of lightning and counting the seconds until the thunder, heart-thumping in excitement. His father once told him that storms were nature's fireworks, or maybe nature's drums telling dramatic stories. Now, thunder growled softly overhead, and Michael felt nothing but a hollow ache and a yearning he couldn't name. Rainwater ran down his face like tears he no longer had strength to cry. "I wish," he began in a whisper, not even sure what he meant to say. He ran both hands over his face. The stubble on his cheeks rasped under his palms. What do I wish? That he could quit? That he could do it all over differently? Go back to when life was simple and happy? He let out a strangled, bitter laugh at the absurdity. You can't go back. Everyone knew that. You grow up and you deal with it. That's life. A heavy raindrop splashed onto his eyelashes, blurring his vision. Michael squeezed his eyes shut against the burning behind them. The night pressed around him, and for once he didn't fight it. He let the darkness and rain and the distant rumble of thunder wash over him. In that moment of surrender, as he sat drenched and broken on a lonely park bench, Michael felt a desperate hope flare within him, small but fervent. "I wish I could just go back," he whispered, barely audible under the rain's susurration. "Back to a time when I knew what happiness felt like. Back to when Dad was alive, when Mom's hugs could fix anything, when tomorrow wasn't something to dread." No sooner had those words left his lips than a strange sensation swept through him. A lurch in his stomach like the drop of an elevator, and a sudden, dizzying tilt of the world. Michael gripped the edge of the bench as the shadows around him lengthened and swirled. For a heartbeat he thought he saw something impossible. Tiny sparks of light, fireflies, dancing in the rain around him. He blinked in confusion. Fireflies in the city? His vision blurred. The distant traffic noises faded, overtaken by a rushing sound like wind in trees. The cold bench beneath him seemed to dissolve, and he had the sensation of falling into the dark. The world went black, and Michael knew no more. Chapter 2. Morning in the Past. A gentle warmth on his face roused Michael from the void. Instead of his modern apartment ceiling, he saw an old-fashioned popcorn ceiling with a few yellowed spots. The walls were painted sky blue and adorned with posters of rocket ships and faraway planets. From the ceiling hung a model solar system he recognized instantly. It was the one he had built with his dad when he was 9. It spun lazily in the breeze of a small fan, casting moving shadows on the walls. Heart pounding, Michael sat up. The sheets against his skin felt soft and worn, printed with cartoon rockets. He looked down to find himself in light blue pajamas patterned with tiny space shuttles. His body felt smaller, lighter. Trembling, he swung his legs out of bed. His feet touched the wooden floor much sooner than expected. The cool boards under his toes and every detail around him were vividly familiar. This was his childhood bedroom, exactly as it had been 30 years ago. On the wall by the door hung a crayon drawing of a stick-figure astronaut labelled Michael in wobbly letters. He remembered creating that in 2nd grade. He reached out and touched it, feeling the waxy crayon bumps under his fingertips. How was this possible? "Mikey, breakfast is almost ready," came a bright voice from down the hall. "Did you sleep in, honey?" Michael's breath caught. That was his mother's voice, young and lively, just as he remembered from childhood. A surge of emotion swelled in his chest. He glanced around wildly, trying to gather himself. The alarm clock on his nightstand read 7:30 a.m., next to a well-loved plush astronaut doll named Marty. He grabbed the stuffed toy, holding it to his chest like a lifeline. "Mikey?" His mother's footsteps approached. The door creaked open, and she appeared, wiping her hands on a dish towel. She looked exactly as he remembered. Early 30s, chestnut-brown hair framing her face, wearing a yellow sundress with a flower smudge on her cheek. She smiled. "Good morning, sleepyhead. You'll miss the pancakes if you don't hurry." Michael stared at her, eyes filling with tears. "Mom?" he croaked. She laughed lightly. "Who else would it be, silly? You look like you've seen a ghost." Stepping closer, she put the back of her hand to his forehead to check for a fever. "You're a little warm. Maybe you had too many blankets." Her touch was cool and real, and Michael closed his eyes at the familiar comfort of it. "I'm okay," he managed, voice small and shaky. He couldn't stop staring at her face, drinking in every beloved feature. She brushed a lock of hair off his forehead. "Get dressed and come on down, sweetie. Your dad's already started eating without us. You know how he is around bacon." She winked conspiratorially. Dad. Michael's heart both leapt and clenched. His father would be here too, alive and well in the next room. Michael swallowed hard and nodded. "I'll be right down." His mother gave him an odd look. His behaviour must have seemed strange. But she just smiled and planted a quick kiss on his forehead. "Hurry up. Pancakes are getting cold." With that, she left, her footsteps creaking down the hall. Michael let out a long breath as soon as she was gone, a few tears escaping down his cheeks. This felt utterly real. He dressed quickly, pulling on a favourite red T-shirt with a superhero logo and denim shorts from his dresser. As he moved, he caught a glimpse of himself in the mirror above the dresser. A small boy with tousled brown hair and wide, astonished green eyes. His heart jolted at the sight. He really was 10 years old again. There was no time to question how this had happened. The smell of bacon and maple syrup was drifting upstairs, making his mouth water and drawing him like a magnet. He stepped into the hallway, taking in little details he'd forgotten. The wallpaper patterned with tiny blue sailboats, the framed family photos lining the wall, the scuff mark on the baseboard from where he'd once crashed his toy race car. Sunlight from a stained glass window on the landing dappled the stairwell in rainbow colours. Everything was exactly as it had been. Michael moved down the stairs, each familiar creak of the wooden steps confirming that this was real. As he descended, the mingled sense of brewing coffee and frying bacon grew stronger, and he could hear the low murmur of the kitchen radio playing a cheerful tune. His heart fluttered with excitement and disbelief. Peeking into the kitchen, he saw them, his mother at the stove flipping pancakes, and his father seated at the table with the morning newspaper. His dad looked so young, no grey in his hair, no tired slump to his shoulders. He was humming along to the radio, and as Michael watched, his father snatched a strip of bacon from a platter when Mom wasn't looking. A half laugh, half sob escaped Michael's throat. His father's eyes flicked up, noticing him. "Well, hey there, buddy," his dad said, smiling brightly. "We were about to send a search party up there. Those pancakes finally lure you out of bed?" Michael couldn't speak. He rushed across the small kitchen and flung his arms around his father's solid waist. The familiar scent of Dad's soap and a hint of engine oil clinging to his shirt flooded Michael's senses. He squeezed his eyes shut, hugging tight. His father, surprised by the ferocity of the hug, patted Michael's back with a big, warm hand. "Whoa! Everything all right, sport?" Michael nodded against his dad's shirt, quickly wiping his eyes on the soft fabric before leaning back. He looked up at his father's face, committing every line to memory. The kind eyes crinkled in concern, the strong jaw, the hint of stubble on his chin. "I'm okay. Just really happy to see you," Michael managed to say, voice trembling with joy. "I missed you, Dad." The words slipped out, raw and sincere, his father's brows knit in mild confusion. "Missed me? I was only in the garage since 6, he joked, ruffling Michael's hair. He chuckled, though he still looked at his son curiously. "Come on now, sit down. Breakfast is getting cold, and I'm not about to let your pancakes go to waste." Michael finally let him go and climbed onto his usual chair. His mother turned from the stove with a plate piled high with golden pancakes. She slid it in front of him, along with a couple strips of crispy bacon. The pancakes were topped with a pat of butter already melting into a shiny glaze. "Good morning, sweetheart," she said, leaning down to kiss the top of his head. Her chestnut hair, still carrying a whiff of her floral shampoo, tickled his cheek briefly. "Morning, Mom," he replied, smiling up at her. He could scarcely believe she was here, bustling around him with all her familiar tenderness. He picked up his fork and knife, cutting into the fluffy stack. As he took his first bite, warm pancake soaked in butter and sweet syrup, his taste buds lit up with delight. It was incredible how a flavour could carry so much memory. He closed his eyes for a second, savouring it. When he opened them, both his parents were watching him with amused expressions. "Slow down or you'll choke, Mikey," his mom laughed gently as he eagerly dug in. "Let the boy enjoy, hon," his dad said, reaching over to touzle Michael's hair again. "Looks like we've got ourselves a pancake enthusiast this morning." Michael smiled around a mouthful and took a sip of the cold milk his mom had set out for him. It was all so ordinary and so extraordinary at once. The kitchen was filled with the soft sizzle of the stove, the clink of plates, the tune of a pop song from the radio, one he faintly remembered from decades ago. Sunlight streamed through the window above the sink, illuminating motes of dust dancing in the air. He felt cocooned in warmth and nostalgia. His parents chatted as they ate. His mom talked about possibly visiting Grandma next month. His dad mentioned that the neighbour's roof repairs were coming along and that he might mow the lawn later if the weather held. Ordinary, pleasant talk. Michael chimed in when prompted, murmuring a "yeah" or "okay" through bites of pancake, but mostly he let their voices wash over him. Every joke, every smile, every detail was something to cherish. He never realized until this moment how beautiful such domestic normalcy could be. After a while, his mother cleared her throat and gave Michael a knowing look. "It's Saturday, Mikey. Why don't you see if Tommy wants to play? I'm sure he'll be excited to see you. Just be back for lunch." Tommy Sullivan, his best friend from childhood. Michael nearly jolted in his seat at the name, though he'd been expecting it. Of course. Tommy lived just 2 houses down the street, and they spent nearly every summer day together. A thrill of eager anticipation rushed through him. He hadn't thought about what he'd do in this impossibility of a day, but seeing Tommy again, that would be something truly special. He nodded vigorously. "Can I, Dad?" he asked, playing along with the childhood protocol of asking permission, though he was already half out of his chair. His father chuckled. "Sure, sport. Just stick around the neighbourhood and be safe. And if you two get up to any mischief, I better not hear about it from Mrs. Sullivan," he added with a mock stern glance. His mom was already wrapping a small plate of extra pancakes in foil. "Take these over to the Sullivans," she said, handing the warm bundle to Michael. "Share the goodness and tell them I said hi." Michael accepted the bundle, the heat warming his hands. This too was familiar, his mom often sending him off with treats to share. "Thanks, Mom," he chirped. He hopped down from his chair. His dad, finishing off his coffee, gave him a salute with the mug. "Have fun, kiddo, and remember what I always say, no getting into trouble bigger than you can handle." Michael grinned. "We'll be good." He paused, looking at both of them, his mom with her bright eyes and caring smile, his dad with a playful smirk still on his face. Love for them swelled inside him so powerfully he thought he might burst. "I love you," Michael blurted out. They both looked pleasantly surprised. His dad and Mom exchanged a warm glance over the table. "We love you too, sweetheart," his mom said, touched, while his dad gave a little nod and added, "Always." With that, Michael turned and practically flew out the back door into the sunshine, clutching the plate of pancakes. His heart felt as light as a balloon. Behind him, through the screen door, he heard his mother laugh softly and say to his father, "Well, someone's in an awfully good mood today," and his father respond, "I haven't seen him this lively in a long time." Michael didn't pause. He raced across the porch, down the steps, and into the wide world of his childhood, eager to seize every moment. Chapter 3. The Old Neighborhood. Michael bounded off the back porch into the bright summer morning. The air was warm and alive with the sounds of July, birds chirping in the oaks, a distant lawnmower chugging to life, the faint laughter of kids playing down the street. The smell of freshly cut grass and honeysuckle hung in the air. Cool dew clung to the lawn, soaking his sneakers as he dashed across the yard, but he didn't care. He unlatched the white picket gate at the side of the house and slipped through, taking a familiar shortcut between his yard and the neighbors'. In a few moments he emerged onto Maple Street, his street, looking just as it had 3 decades ago. A few cars were parked along the curb. The Martinsons' station wagon was still there with its wood-panelled sides, and the O'Neill's tabby cat lounged on their front stoop, washing itself in the sun. Towering maple trees lined the sidewalk, their green leaves whispering in a gentle breeze. 2 doors down stood the Sullivan House, a sky-blue bungalow with white shutters and a magnificent magnolia tree in full bloom out front. Michael could see a bicycle lying on its side in the Sullivan driveway, and the garage door was open. As he approached, he heard voices echoing from within. Peering around the edge of the magnolia, Michael spotted his best friend. Tommy Sullivan was in the garage with his dad, both of them bent over an open tackle box. Tommy's shock of red hair stuck out in all directions as usual, and he wore a green Ninja Turtles t-shirt smeared with what looked like a bit of grease. Michael's heart leapt at the sight of him, so youthful and alive and real. Mr. Sullivan looked up first, hearing Michael's sneakers crunch on the gravel drive. "Well, hey there, Mike," he called out, raising a hand in greeting. Look who finally rolled out of bed. Tommy spun around at that, and a grin exploded across his freckled face. "Mikey!" he shouted. Without hesitation, Tommy bolted out of the garage, nearly skidding on the driveway in his excitement. He collided into Michael with an exuberant hug that almost crushed the foil-covered plate between them. Laughing, Michael hugged him back one-armed, keeping the pancakes safe with his other hand. "Whoa, easy! You'll squish the goods," he joked. Tommy stepped back, eyes wide as he noticed the plate. "Pancakes?" he asked, as if Christmas had come early. "Courtesy of my mom," Michael confirmed, peeling back the foil to show the syrupy treats inside. "Sweet," Tommy crowed. He turned and yelled back toward the garage, "Dad, Mrs. Kim sent pancakes." Mr. Sullivan chuckled, wiping his hands on an oily rag as he walked over. "Your mom is an angel," he said to Michael. He took the plate off Michael's hands. "Thank her for us. These will make a great post-fishing snack." He nodded toward the tackle and the small fishing boat hitched to the back of their pickup truck in the driveway. "Fishing?" Michael echoed, excitement sparking. He remembered in a flash. The Sullivans loved to fish, and they often invited him along to Oakwood Lake, a reservoir on the outskirts of town. In fact, one of his happiest summer memories was of fishing with Tommy and their dads. "Yes, sir," Mr. Sullivan said. "We're heading to Oakwood Lake this morning. Figured we'd take advantage of the weather before it gets too hot. We haven't left yet. Got a little delayed." He gestured to the truck. "You want to come along? There's room in the boat for another expert fisherman." Tommy clasped his hands together in a pleading gesture and put on a goofy, begging face. "Please, Mikey, we'll catch a monster bass. I just know it." Michael didn't need convincing. His soul practically sang at the idea, but he remembered to play the part. "I just got to let my parents know," he said. "Be right back." Actually, his father had more or less given general permission to play, but he wanted to make sure they knew he'd be at the lake for the morning. Without another word, he spun on his heel and dashed back down the sidewalk with Tommy hot on his heels. They ran the whole 2-house distance back to Michael's place. Michael's lungs burned pleasantly by the time he saw his father out front, rolling the lawnmower out of the shed. He skidded to a halt in the driveway, Tommy nearly bumping into him, both of them catching their breath with big grins. "Dad," Michael called, panting a little. "Mr. Sullivan invited me to go fishing at Oakwood Lake with them. Can I go?" His father looked up, squinting in the sun. "Fishing, eh?" He glanced at Tommy and Mr. Sullivan's truck down the street and smiled. "I don't see why not. You got your sunscreen on?" Michael flushed slightly. Even now, Dad concerned himself with the details. Not yet," Tommy piped up. "We have some in the truck, Mr. Kim. I'll make sure he uses it." Mr. Kim nodded approvingly. "All right then. Just remember the life jacket rule on the boat." "Will do," Michael promised, practically hopping in excitement. His father chuckled and gave Michael a pat on the shoulder. "Have a great time, sport. You catch one, bring it back to show off, all right?" Michael beamed. "I will." Within 15 minutes, Michael and Tommy were in the back of the Sullivan pickup truck, bouncing on the bench seat as it rumbled out of the neighborhood. Michael had shouted a quick goodbye and thank you to his mom, who waved from the porch with a smile, after dabbing some sunscreen on his nose, of course. They had all the essentials: fishing rods, tackle, a cooler of cold drinks, and the leftover pancakes tucked safely aside. The drive to Oakwood Lake took them beyond the town's edge. Michael watched eagerly as familiar sights whizzed by: the red barn with a faded ad for chewing tobacco painted on its side, the little ice cream stand, closed this early in the day, where they'd beg for cones on hot afternoons, rows of corn in the fields standing tall and green. Everything smelled fresh after last night's distant rain, a cocktail of damp hay, wildflowers, and sun-warmed asphalt through the open truck windows. Tommy yammered the whole way, overflowing with 10-year-old energy. "We're going to catch so many fish! I brought my lucky lure and everything, and guess what? I found a new secret spot by the reeds last time that's definitely where old Big Mouth hides." Michael listened, grinning and occasionally chiming in with just the right enthusiastic agreement, though part of him was marvelling at Tommy's chatter itself. How long had it been since someone talked to him with such unbridled excitement? It was infectious. At the lake, the morning sun danced on the water, turning it into a rippling expanse of silver and gold. The lake was calm today, ringed by tall pine and birch trees, their reflections painted on the surface. Mr. Sullivan backed the trailer down the boat launch, and soon they were afloat on the gentle waves in a small rowboat, Tommy and Michael seated in the bow and middle, much as with Mr. Sullivan at the stern handling the oars and motor. Before they cast their lines, Tommy dug into the pocket of his shorts. "Check it out, Mikey," he whispered, revealing a small amber-coloured glass marble in his palm. It was the size of a large grape, translucent and rich in colour. "My lucky tiger's eye. Found it by Miller's Creek yesterday. If you make a wish on it, maybe it'll help us catch a whopper." Michael's breath caught. He gently picked the marble from Tommy's hand. The sunlight made it glow like a tiny sun in his fingers. It was uncanny to see it here after just having seen it, or something like it in that strange moment in the park. He almost felt a tingling warmth from it. Closing his fingers around it, Michael shut his eyes. "I wish we catch the biggest fish in the lake," he intoned playfully. And in his heart he added a quieter wish of his own. "I wish this day, this feeling, could last." He handed the marble back, and Tommy, looking satisfied, tucked it safely into the pocket of his t-shirt. "All right, now we're definitely going to catch something huge." With the ritual complete, they got down to the serious business of fishing. Mr. Sullivan helped them bait their hooks with wriggling night crawlers. Michael, who hadn't done this in so long, followed Tommy's lead and cast his line out into the sparkling water. The float landed with a plunk and bobbed on the gentle ripples. For a time, the three of them sat in companionable quiet, broken only by the distant caw of a heron and the clicking whir of Mr. Sullivan reeling in and casting again. Dragonflies in iridescent blues and greens skimmed the surface of the lake. A light breeze shushed through the reeds along the shore. Michael found himself closing his eyes just to feel the sun on his face and listen to the small sounds of nature. The lap of water on the hull, the creak of an oar, the buzz of insects. His racing mind from the night before had gone completely still. Tommy was the first to get a bite. His float ducked under and he whooped, standing up so fast the boat rocked. "I got one! I got one!" After a spirited tussle, Tommy clenching his tongue between his teeth in determination, and Mr. Sullivan coaching him to reel steady, not too fast, a tiny sunfish, gleaming green and orange, was pulled into the boat. It wasn't more than the size of Michael's hand, but you'd think Tommy had caught a whale from his victory cheer. Michael and Mr. Sullivan laughed and clapped, and Tommy plopped the little fish into a bucket of lake water to show his mom later. They'd release it afterward. Michael's turn came next. He was watching a pair of turtles sunning themselves on a log when he felt a sharp tug nearly yank the rod from his hands. "Whoa!" he exclaimed, heart leaping. "Fish on!" Tommy yelled, scrambling to get the net. Michael gripped the rod tight, remembering to jerk it back to set the hook like his dad taught him long ago. The water erupted as something large fought beneath, sending waves rocking against the boat. Michael's palms stung as the reel spun. It was stronger than he expected. "Take it easy," Mr. Sullivan advised, placing a steady hand on Michael's shoulder. "Let it run a bit, then reel it in slow. That's it, nice and easy." Michael nodded, adrenaline coursing. He worked the reel, arms straining as the fish darted and dove. For a moment, the fish nearly wedged itself under the boat, the rod bending alarmingly. But Michael remembered a trick. He shifted the rod to the side, coaxing the fish out from under. After a few exhilarating minutes, a flash of silver and green broke the surface, definitely bigger than Tommy's catch. Tommy leaned over with the net, excitement making his freckles stand out on his flushed face. "Bring it this way. Almost. Got it?" He scooped, and flapping inside the net was a good-sized bass, maybe a couple of pounds. "All right, way to go, Mike." Mr. Sullivan crowed as Tommy hauled the wriggling base aboard. Michael let out a breathless laugh, feeling triumphant and a little shaky from the thrill. The base flipped and thumped at the bottom of the boat until Mr. Sullivan expertly removed the hook and held it up. It was beautiful in its own slimy way, mottled green with a white belly, opening and closing its large mouth in indignation. "That's a keeper size if you want it," Mr. Sullivan said, "but your mom might not be thrilled to clean it." "Let's let him go," Michael decided, gazing at the fish. It felt important to release it somehow. He gently took the bass in both hands, marveling that he recalled exactly how to hold it to avoid the fin spines, and lowered it back into the lake. For a second it hovered, as if perplexed by the whole ordeal. Then, with a flick of its tail, it disappeared into the deep. Tommy shrugged. "There goes lunch," he teased, but he was grinning. "That was awesome." They bumped fists and settled back to fishing, though after that grand catch the rest of the morning was uneventful. A few more nibbles, one tiny perch that Michael pulled in and tossed back. Tommy told a wildly exaggerated story of nearly catching a legendary huge catfish last summer. Mr. Sullivan rolled his eyes good-naturedly at that. By the time the sun climbed toward noon, the tackle box was a mess of tangled lines and they'd polished off the pancake snacks and a couple of sodas. On shore, they packed up the gear and decided to take a photo with the trophy sunfish Tommy had caught before letting it go. Mr. Sullivan snapped the picture. Michael and Tommy kneeling by the water, holding the little fish together and grinning like fools. As the sunfish darted back into the lake, Tommy gave a wistful sigh and stretched. "I guess we should head back. I'm starving." The ride home was slower, pleasantly tiring. Michael sat by the window, wind drying the last droplets of lake water from his hair. He felt a kind of serene happiness he hadn't felt in years. In the span of a morning, he'd relived a piece of his childhood he never thought he'd experience again. Back on Maple Street, Mr. Sullivan dropped the boys off in front of Michael's house while he went to park the boat. Tommy and Michael hopped out of the truck and Tommy handed Michael the foil packet, now containing just one lonely pancake. "For you, courtesy of your mom," Tommy said with a grin. "I ate like 3 of them." Michael laughed. "We'll call it even since you netted my base." He split the remaining pancake in half and gave a piece to Tommy. They wolfed them down with sticky fingers, delicious even cold. Tommy wiped syrup from his chin. "I'm going to grab lunch. Meet back up after? Maybe Treefort or Creek." "You bet," Michael replied. As Tommy trotted off toward his house, Michael called after him, "Don't forget to put that marble back in your treasure box." Tommy turned, walking backwards a few paces. He pulled the amber marble from his pocket and held it up between thumb and forefinger, sunlight making it glow. "Never leaves my sight," he said, then tucked it away and gave Michael a thumbs up. "See you soon, Mikey." Michael waved, then turned to see his father standing in their front yard, a baseball glove on and another held out toward him. His dad had evidently finished mowing. The scent of fresh-cut grass hung in the air around him, and faint tire tracks crisscrossed the neat lawn. "How was it?" his father called, smiling. "Catch any big ones?" Michael jogged up, holding his arms out wide. "Dad, I caught a bass this big," he exaggerated, grin stretching from ear to ear. His father raised his eyebrows in mock awe. "That's so? We'll have to put you on the cover of Fishing magazine." He tossed the spare baseball glove to Michael, who dropped his tackle and pancakes to snatch it out of the air. "Think you still remember how to throw?" His dad's eyes gleamed with playful challenge as he produced a ball from his pocket. Michael slipped his little hand into the glove. The smell of leather and a hint of old sweat brought back a flood of Little League memories. "Only one way to find out," he said, smacking the fist of his other hand into the glove's palm. They took positions on the lawn, a short distance apart. The afternoon sun was mellow, and a few cicadas had started their rhythmic buzz in the trees. Michael's father wound up in an exaggerated pitching stance, leg lifted high like a pro, and gently tossed the ball. It arced toward Michael, and he tracked it into his glove with a soft thump. He felt an irrational burst of pride at having caught it, as if he weren't an adult with decent hand-eye coordination, but truly a kid who half expected to fumble. Grinning, Michael drew the ball from the glove and threw it back. The motion was awkward at first, his body not quite remembering the coordination, but the ball made it to his father, albeit a bit off-center. Dad snagged it easily and gave a theatrical flourish. "He's still got an arm, folks." They fell into a comfortable rhythm, tossing the baseball back and forth. Sometimes they spoke, other times they just enjoyed the simple, wordless activity. Michael regaled his father with a dramatized account of the base battle, reenacting how the fish nearly pulled him in. His dad listened with an open, happy smile, only interjecting to tease, "Sure it wasn't you who was nearly pulled under? That fish might tell a different story." As the sun dipped lower and the light turned honey gold, their throws lengthened, and the conversation gave way to a peaceful lull. Michael's arm was getting a bit tired, not that he'd ever admit it, and he was content just to be there in the moment, hearing the cicadas and the distant cheers of some kids playing tag down the block. After a particularly long throw, Michael's father held the ball and walked in a few paces, motioning for a timeout. Michael trotted closer as well, sensing something on his dad's mind. They met near the big oak that anchored the corner of the yard, its shade a welcome cool patch on the grass. His father sat down on the slope at the base of the tree, patting the spot beside him. Michael joined him, legs stretched out in front. The earth was a little damp beneath the oak, and the smell of rich soil mixed with the sweet scent of cut grass. For a moment, they watched a pair of fireflies rise lazily from the bushes, blinking in the daylight that was just starting to fade. Michael knew what he wanted to ask, but it felt tricky to put into words without sounding odd for a 10-year-old. He bit his lip and decided to trust the moment. "Dad?" he said, keeping his eyes on a blade of grass he was twisting between his small fingers. "Are you happy with how things are?" His father turned to look at him. Slightly taken aback by the earnest question, he tilted his head, considering. "I'd say so, yes. Why do you ask?" Michael shrugged, still looking down. "I don't know. You and Mom do a lot, like working and taking care of everything. I just wondered if you ever wished things were different, if you wanted more." A gentle breeze ruffled Michael's hair, and he saw his dad's shadow on the grass shift as he leaned back on his hands. "Well," his father began slowly, "when I was younger, I had a lot of big plans for what my life would be. Thought about traveling the world, maybe starting a business, making a lot of money. Your Uncle Jack, remember him? He went and did some of those things. Big shot executive in the city now." Michael nodded. Uncle Jack was actually not a blood uncle, but Dad's old friend. He rarely visited, but Michael vaguely recalled a serious man in a suit who once gave him a stiff pat on the head and then spent the whole dinner talking about stock markets. His father continued, "Jack made a fortune, sure, but he also worked so hard he lost touch with his family and his health. Whenever I see him, he looks miserable despite all his money. I learned something from watching him. I've seen people chase after more and end up lonely." He paused, drawing a breath. "I chose a different path, I guess. Settled down here in a small town. Married your mom. We have a cozy home, good friends, and we have you." He nudged Michael gently with his elbow. "To me, that's plenty. It may not be flashy, but it makes me happy." Michael finally looked up into his father's face. There was no lie there, just simple truth. His dad's eyes were fixed on the horizon, where the sky was streaked with the first pink of sunset. He looked content, at peace. "You don't ever feel like you're missing out?" Michael asked softly. His dad turned to meet his gaze. "Sometimes I wonder what if. Sure, I think that's normal, but I wouldn't trade what I have now for any of those what ifs. When I come home and see your mom reading on the couch or hear you playing in your room, I know I have the important things. Love, family, a little piece of the world to call ours." He smiled and put an arm around Michael, drawing him close. "And you know what? I really am proud of our life. Of you. You're the best thing I've ever helped create, kiddo." Michael felt a lump forming in his throat. He leaned into his father's side, resting his head against that familiar plaid shirt. "Even if I don't catch monster fish every time?" he joked weakly, trying not to tear up. His dad chuckled, a deep, reassuring sound. "Even then, hey, someday you'll grow up and maybe do incredible things, whatever you set your mind to. But I hope you'll remember that you don't have to be rich or famous to be happy. You just have to have the right things." "The right things," Michael echoed quietly. He knew exactly what his father meant. Love, integrity, family, contentment. The very things Michael in his adult life had been neglecting. They sat there together as dusk crept in. A few more fireflies winked in the gathering shadows under the hedge, and a cricket started chirping nearby. When Michael's mother called from the porch, dinner ready, his father gave Michael one more squeeze and then stood, groaning a little theatrically as his knees popped. "These old bones aren't what they used to be." Michael giggled, and together they ambled inside, Michael carrying the gloves and ball. That evening, dinner was grilled cheese sandwiches with tomato soup, simple and utterly satisfying after the active morning and afternoon. Michael devoured 2 sandwiches, dipping each bite into the warm, savoury soup, and listened as his mom and dad bantered about minor things. His mom teased his dad about the crooked birdhouse he'd put up. "It's avant-garde, not crooked," he protested, making Michael laugh into his milk. His dad, in turn, complimented Mom's tomato soup as if it were 5-star cuisine, prompting her to roll her eyes and smile. Michael soaked it all in, imprinting it on his memory. After dinner, true to his 10-year-old form, he felt the heavy pull of sleep from all the excitement of the day. His eyelids were drooping as he helped dry the dishes, a chore he usually might grumble about but tonight performed with zeal. Soon his mother noticed his flagging energy and shooed him toward the bathroom to brush his teeth. Though part of Michael wanted to fight it, knowing this beautiful interlude could vanish when he closed his eyes, his small body insisted on winding down. Clean and in fresh pajamas, he climbed into bed. To his pleasant surprise, both Mom and Dad came to tuck him in, a luxury usually reserved for younger kids. His mom sat on the edge of the bed, smoothing the blanket up to his chest. His dad stood by the doorway, arms folded, smiling contentedly down at him. In the soft glow of the nightlight, they both looked a bit like angels to Michael. "You had quite a day, huh?" his mother whispered, gently brushing a lock of hair from Michael's forehead. "The best day," Michael murmured, fighting a yawn. He reached out and took her hand, squeezing it. "Thanks, Mom, for everything." Her eyes shone as she squeezed back. "You're very welcome, my love." His father stepped closer and placed his big warm hand on Michael's blanketed foot, a gesture so familiar and reassuring. "Sleep tight, sport. We'll see you in the morning." "Night, Dad." "Night, Mom," Michael said. His voice was trembling again with emotion, an overflow of gratitude. "I love you." They each answered in kind, his mom with a tender, "I love you too, sweetheart," and his dad with a soft, "Love you, son." His mom leaned in and kissed his forehead, then they both slipped quietly from the room, leaving the door ajar just a few inches, exactly how he always liked it. In the stillness that followed, Michael stared up at the faint outlines of the glow-in-the-dark star stickers on his ceiling. He remembered the night he stuck them there with his dad, how they charged them with a flashlight to make them shine. They were dim now, but still faintly visible, tiny constant friends watching over him. A chorus of crickets serenaded outside the open window, and a gentle night breeze billowed the curtains. Michael felt utterly safe, utterly loved. Yet a bittersweet ache spread in his chest. He knew somehow that this enchanted return to childhood was drawing to a close. Maybe it would be gone when he woke, maybe sooner. He didn't know the mechanics of how or why, only that he was immensely thankful. "Thank you," he whispered into the darkness, not sure who or what he was speaking to God, to fate, to whatever had heard his wish. A single tear slid down his cheek, disappearing into the pillow. He closed his eyes, Marty the astronaut plush tucked under his arm, and let the wave of contented exhaustion carry him away. Outside, beyond Michael's dreaming smile, fireflies danced in the warm summer night. Chapter 4. Back to Tomorrow. Sunlight was warming Michael's face when he stirred. He opened his eyes to find himself not in the cosy dimness of his childhood bedroom, but on a rain-damp park bench, surrounded by the towering shapes of the city. Pale dawn light filtered through wet green leaves above him. For a moment he sat very still, heart pounding, as reality settled in. He was back in the present. The city around him was waking up to a new day. He slowly pushed himself upright. His body felt stiff and cold in his sodden clothes, a sharp contrast to the snug warmth he'd felt under quilts just moments before. A shiver ran through him, but Michael hardly noticed it. Despite the morning chill, he felt an inner glow, as if the warmth of that magical day he'd lived was still inside him, lighting him up from within. He took in his surroundings with fresh eyes. The little park looked transformed in the early morning hush. The last tatters of night mist clung to the grass, which sparkled with droplets. Above, the horizon glowed with bands of rose and gold, heralding the sun's imminent rise. Last night's storm had washed the city clean. The air even smelled new, carrying a faint scent of wet earth and ozone. It reminded him, oddly, of the scent after a summer thunderstorm in his childhood, when he and Tommy would race sticks down the flooded gutters and splash barefoot in puddles. Michael drew a deep breath, tasting the crispness of morning. A sparrow fluttered down to the path, pecking at some invisible morsel, utterly unafraid of him. In the distance he heard the whoosh of a street sweeper and the faint honk of a taxi. Normally those city noises blended into a backdrop of stress, but now they felt almost comforting in their normalcy. This was his world, and for the first time in a very long time he was glad to be in it. He shifted to stand, and as he did, something rolled off his lap and clattered onto the pavement by his feet. Michael looked down and blinked in surprise. There, in a little puddle, was a small amber marble glinting in the new light. Heart-thudding, he bent and picked it up. The marble gleamed in his palm, a tiny orb of captured sunshine. It was unmistakably Tommy's tiger's eye wishing marble. A smile broke over Michael's face, and tears pricked his eyes. He closed his fingers around the little glass sphere, feeling its smooth, cool surface press into his skin. Whether it was a remnant of magic or just a token his subconscious conjured, he didn't care. It was real, and it was proof. Proof that what happened was more than a dream. He slipped the marble safely into the pocket of his wrinkled slacks, patting it once as if to assure himself it was truly there. Michael stood up, stretching. His muscles protested after a night on the bench, but his mind felt clear and sharp. The knotted anxiety that had been his constant companion was gone. In its place was steady calm and quiet joy. Echoes of his father's voice still soothed him. You don't have to be rich or famous to be happy. You just have to have the right things. And his mother's gentle care, Tommy's laughter, his own innocent promises, they were all still with him, like treasures he had brought back from another country. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his phone, which had mercifully stayed off through the night. Powering it on, he watched the screen wake up and begin its assault of buzzing notifications. There were dozens of text messages and missed calls, mostly from work. One from Richard, "Where the hell are you? This is unacceptable." Another later, "Presentation cancelled. Call me immediately." A slew of increasingly angry follow-ups. Michael's brow furrowed slightly, but only in mild concern. None of it, no rant from Richard, no missed meeting, felt like the end of the world anymore. He saw a voicemail from his mother, left around 1:30 a.m., no doubt worried after his abrupt exit from their earlier call, and a missed text from a college friend wishing him a happy weekend, which he'd ignored at the time. So many messages he normally would feel obliged to respond to instantly, and none of it truly mattered as much as he once thought. First things first, Michael pressed the button to call his mother. It rang only once. "Michael?" came her voice. Anxious and quick. "Oh, thank goodness. Are you all right, dear?" Hearing her, his real mother in the present, older and a touch frail but alive, brought a lump to his throat. "Hi, Mom," he said softly. "I'm all right. I'm sorry about last night. I didn't mean to worry you." "Oh, honey." Her relief was palpable. "What happened? I woke up and had such a feeling that something was wrong. You never called back. You left so suddenly." Michael closed his eyes, picturing her in a nightgown, phone clutched to her ear in the dark. Guilt pricked him, but he pushed it aside. This was a new day, and he would make it up to her. "I had a rough night," he admitted. "Work was overwhelming, and I needed to clear my head. Ended up falling asleep on a friend's couch." It wasn't the entire truth, but it was close enough and far less complicated than the real story. She made a sympathetic noise. "That job of yours, I swear, Michael, you need to take care of yourself. You know, your father worried about how hard you were pushing." "I know, Mom," he interjected gently. "And you're right. Actually, I've realized a lot. I'm going to make some changes." He took a breath, feeling a kind of calm determination as he said, "I'm going to take some time off. Maybe a lot of time." There was a pause on the other end. "Really?" she said cautiously, as if not daring to believe it. "What about your big project?" "It'll survive without me," Michael said with a small, confident laugh. It felt good to say that, and to mean it. "Well, good," she said, the tension in her voice easing. I'm so glad to hear that, honey. You deserve a break. You work too hard." Michael smiled. "Actually, I was thinking I might drive out to see you, today even, if you're free." "Free?" she practically sputtered. "Of course I'm free. Oh my, of course, come. The house is a mess." Michael doubted that. "But I can whip up your old room in no time. Are you thinking of staying a few days? I hope so." "That's the plan," he chuckled. "Also, do you still have Dad's fishing gear?" His mother fell silent for a second. "Yes," she said, her voice a little thick. "Yes, I kept it all." "Great. Maybe we can take a trip to Oakwood Lake," Michael said. "I have some really good memories of that place." "I'd like that," she replied softly. He could tell she was moved. Oakwood Lake had been one of his father's favorite spots. "And Mom? How about we invite Uncle Jack to dinner one of those nights too?" he added. He recalled what his father had said about his old friend. Perhaps he could reach out, see if the years had changed Uncle Jack at all, maybe share a little of what he'd learned. If nothing else, it felt like the right thing to do. Connect with people again. His mother sounded surprised, but pleased. "I'm sure he'd love to hear from you. You know, he always asks how you're doing whenever I bump into him." Michael nodded, filing that away. They discussed a few more logistics, his approximate arrival time, her insistence on cooking his favourite pot roast for Sunday dinner, then said their goodbyes with warmth brimming in every word. As he hung up, Michael felt a sense of purpose and anticipation. He was going home. Not just physically to his mother's house, but in a way returning to everything that word meant. Family, roots, love. He scrolled through his contacts and found Tommy's name, Tom Sullivan. They had drifted apart after high school and lost touch, but in this age of social media and smartphones, he'd acquired his number through a reunion email list. They hadn't spoken in years. Last he heard, Tommy was in Chicago. Without overthinking it, Michael hit the call button. It rang twice before a groggy, confused voice answered. "Hello? Tommy? It's Mike Kim," he said, heart fluttering with excitement. A pause, then an explosion of recognition. "Mikey? Holy, wow, man, it's been forever." Tommy's voice, though deeper and rough with sleep, quickly warmed into the familiar, friendly timbre Michael knew so well. Michael found himself laughing. "It has. Sorry to call out of the blue and so early. I was thinking about you." "Dude, I'm so glad you did," Tommy said, sounding more awake by the second. "I've tried to look you up a couple times, but you were like a ghost. How are you? Still in New York?" They spent the next few minutes exchanging the highlights. Michael admitted he'd been swallowed by his career, but was coming up for air. Tommy shared that he'd moved to Chicago, started a small architectural firm, and was now married with a baby due in a few months. Michael congratulated him heartily, and it felt absolutely genuine. "You know," Michael said, pacing as he talked. He realized he'd begun strolling toward his apartment building without noticing. "I'm actually taking some time off. I might do a little road trip. Chicago's not that far." Tommy laughed. "I would love that. We have a guest room with your name on it, buddy, and a fridge full of beer like old times, except we don't have to sneak it now." Michael grinned. How easily they'd fallen into comfortable rapport. It felt like picking up an old book and finding the pages still vibrant. "I'll let you know once I map it out. Also, do you still remember the handshake?" Tommy snorted. "Up high, down low, rocket to the sky," he recited instantly. Michael performed the little hand motions to himself right there on the sidewalk. "Still got it," he confirmed, beaming. They chatted a bit longer. Tommy made him promise to send photos from Oakwood Lake, for old time's sake, man. And Michael got his wife's name so he could bring a gift for the baby when he visited. When they finally hung up, it was with mutual vows not to lose touch again. Michael realized he'd walked all the way back to his apartment building while on the phone. The lobby door clicked behind him as he stepped in, shoes squeaking slightly on the polished floor from their residual dampness. The doorman, Frank, raised an eyebrow in surprise at Michael's dishevelled appearance. Suit askew, hair mussed, no briefcase or laptop in sight at the start of the workday. "Morning, Mr. Kim. Everything all right?" Frank asked, concerned but polite. Michael paused, then gave the older man a broad smile. "Good morning, Frank. Everything's fine. Better than fine, actually." As he passed the front desk, he added in a conspiratorial whisper, "I decided to play hooky from work today." Frank's eyes widened, then he chuckled. Michael Kim, the building's resident workaholic, taking a day off. Perhaps the world was turning upside down. "Enjoy it, sir," Frank said with a little salute. "Oh, I will," Michael replied, and headed for the elevators. Back in his apartment, he felt a burst of energy. Normally, returning here after an all-nighter at work would make him feel weary and hollow, but not today. Today, this small one-bedroom felt like a launching pad for a fresh start. He peeled off his rain-crusted work clothes and stepped straight into a steaming hot shower. The water pressure was strong and the heat intense. He usually kept it cooler to wake himself up, but now he let the heat soothe him. Grime and tension washed off, swirling down the drain. As he massaged shampoo into his scalp, he caught himself humming the tune Tommy and he had sung in the truck. "Country roads, take me home," and he laughed aloud. He couldn't remember the last time he'd sung in the shower. After toweling off, he put on his most comfortable pair of jeans, sneakers, and a soft flannel shirt. He stared for a moment at the crisp suits and ties lining one side of his closet. They suddenly looked like costumes of someone he used to know. Shaking his head with a bemused smile, he grabbed a duffel bag and began packing essentials for his trip to his mom's, and beyond, perhaps to see Tommy and others. A couple of casual outfits, some warm socks, toiletries. On impulse, he slipped in the old sketchbook he'd dug up the night before. Maybe he'd sit by the lake and doodle something, like he used to when he was young. A cabin by the water, or his mom's portrait as she enjoyed the breeze. The thought made him happy. In the corner of his bedroom stood the fishing rod his mother had mentioned, a spare of his father's. It was dusty, the reel a bit stiff as he tested it, but it would do. He made a mental note to stop by a tackle shop on the way for fresh line and bait. Task done, Michael felt one last piece of business nagging at him. Work. His laptop was still in his bag by the door where he dropped it last night. He powered it on and found exactly what he expected. Dozens of new emails, including one from HR about urgent meeting, your absence, and one from Richard full of question marks and exclamation points. Michael composed a short, clear email in reply to HR CCing Richard. He explained that due to personal reasons he would be resigning from the company effective immediately. He expressed gratitude for the opportunities over the years, but emphasized that it was time for him to move on. His words were cordial and brief. Surprisingly, he felt no second-guessing, no anxiety. He clicked send and shut the laptop with finality. Almost instantly, his phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. Even on a Saturday morning, Richard must have been at his desk, reading emails like a hawk. Michael glanced at the screen. Richard, and underneath, answer. Answer now. With a half-smile, Michael pressed decline. A second later, another buzz. A text, call me ASAP. We need to discuss." He turned the phone off entirely and slid it into a drawer. He didn't need it for now, not where he was going. Michael took a moment to scribble a quick handwritten note to his landlord about his upcoming absence and dropping off rent early. He was old school that way. Then he swung the duffel over his shoulder, grabbed his fishing rod and keys, and took a last look around the apartment. In the morning light, the place looked a bit barren. Tidy, yes, but lacking life. That was all right. He would fill it with life when he returned. Maybe put up some photos from this trip. Maybe finally buy that guitar he'd thought about and stand it in the corner, ready for a new hobby. The possibilities felt wide open. He stepped out into the hallway and locked the door behind him with a satisfying click. As Michael emerged from his building into the sunlight, he nearly bumped into his neighbour, Mrs. Alvarez, who was out walking her tiny dog, Peaches. The little terrier yapped happily at Michael. She always liked him, probably because he snuck her treats sometimes. "Good morning, Michael," Mrs. Alvarez greeted him, eyes flicking in curiosity to the fishing rod in his hand and the duffel on his shoulder. "Going somewhere?" He grinned, feeling almost boyish. "Morning, yes. I'm heading to visit my mom for a few days. Figured I'd do a little fishing too." "How lovely," she replied, adjusting her scarf. "It's a perfect weekend for it. Your mother will be delighted, I'm sure." She peered at him kindly. "It's good to see you looking so cheerful, dear. You've been so tired lately." Michael nodded. "I am cheerful. I realized I needed a break, so I'm taking one." "Good for you," she said sincerely. "Safe travels. Catch a big one for me." He laughed. "I'll try. Take care, Mrs. Alvarez. Bye, Peaches." He scratched the dog behind the ears before heading down the street toward the parking garage where his car was waiting. Not long after, Michael's car rolled out onto the city streets. He turned onto the avenue that would eventually lead to the highway, passing familiar blocks that this morning seemed somehow new. He noticed a man on the corner handing a cup of coffee to a homeless vet who often sat there. Michael had hurried by that vet dozens of times without a glance. Today he stopped at the red light right by them and had time to see the grateful smile on the vet's face as he received the warm drink. Humanity in small moments. The light turned green, and Michael eased onward, leaving downtown behind. As he merged into the morning traffic heading out of the city, he cast one last glance in the rearview mirror. The skyscrapers of Manhattan were shrinking behind him, the glass towers glinting in the sunlight like distant beacons. Those offices that had once consumed his life now looked small against the vast sky, and he felt only relief and liberation as they faded from view. Satisfied, he turned on the radio and found a classic rock station playing an upbeat tune from decades past. Within half an hour, the cityscape gave way to open fields and woodlands. Michael rolled down his window and felt the cool country air rush in, carrying the scent of damp earth and wildflowers. Every mile that unfurled beneath his wheels felt like a weight lifting, a step toward home in the truest sense. By the time he reached the open highway, with green horizons beckoning ahead, he was singing along to the radio with the wind in his hair. He didn't know exactly what the future would bring. He didn't know if the changes he was making would all pan out perfectly, or what challenges lay ahead. But as sunlit miles rolled by, one thing was certain. He would face whatever came next with the hopeful heart of the boy he had been and the clear eyes of the man he had become. And that, he thought with a smile as wide as the open road, was better than any wish come true. As the road stretched ahead, Michael felt the burdens of yesterday dissolve behind him, replaced by the quiet promise of something real and lasting. He had reclaimed the forgotten pieces of himself, not through escape, but by remembering what truly mattered. With the past as his compass and the present in his hands, he drove toward a future worth living. Sometimes the way forward begins by going back.
Every story has an end, but here, the mysteries never stop. Thank you for watching and being a part of this journey into the unknown. Your support keeps these stories alive, and there's plenty more waiting for you. We drop 3 new stories every week, so if you crave suspense, the unexplained, and the downright chilling, make sure you're subscribed and ready for what's next. Until then, keep your lights on, your doors locked, and remember, Some stories stay with you long after they're told.